Hail Hail and welcome to Part 11 of the Celtic History podcast series, which charts the history of Celtic Football Club from 1887 to the current day. In Part 10 of the series, titled The Rebels Have Won, Chris was joined by a number of guests and they covered the period from 1990 to 1994. The early 90s has the club going through its darkest hour in the modern era. Former Glasgow Giants, Rangers, in liquidation, are spending wild amounts of money while Celtic go from manager to manager at a time when the standard of player recruitment rapidly declines. Off the pitch, the club is in turmoil as the directors press the self-destruct button time and time again. However, with a rise in fan power, a new dawn breaks, which gives the support sustained hope for the future. We hear eyewitness accounts from those actively involved in the revolution at the club, from fans who lived through this era, as well as from players who proudly wore the hoops. There is a tribute to Phil O'Donnell, details of a playing kit, and history of a stadium, all mixed with more fan stories and confessions.
By the early 1990s, concerns about the Kelly and White dynasty had been growing.
Now, you didn't have to be a genius to realise that we were getting left behind, way behind, and that something had to be done.
With a few diamonds like John Collins, but the vast majority of the players were second rate.
After another trophyless campaign, Billy McNeill would be axed and replaced by the inexperienced Liam Brady.
Little did we know that after then it was going to be lean times for the next 5 years.
With the lies now unravelling fast, the Celtic board were about to unravel themselves.
I have Matt McGlone, famously from Celts for Change, on the line.
I said, if you care about your club, turn up at the City Halls tomorrow night. Thankfully, the fans got involved. There was anger, there was resentment, there was a real love of Celtic. We had hopefully the fans on board and the emotion and the driven spirit to try and do something. We had a banner made which said, back the team, sack the board.
Okay, so I'm delighted to say I am now talking to Brian Dempsey.
Time was running out and running out fast. But I did feel that pressure, not from the fans, pressure for the Celtic support. I was in a completely different wavelength and a different planet from them. Theirs was self-preservation, and mine was moving forward. That magnificent group of people that the Celtic support owe so much to, called Celts for Change, Matt McGlone and his team, the Celtic support owe them so much.
A lad called Willie Wilson started an organisation, Save Our Celts, of course.
And I think the game gets remembered more for Rangers losing the plot as much as Celtic winning 3-0.
I can remember when Macari got appointed, I never thought, I just thought, oh no. But then, his first game in charge, we go to Ibrox, beat Rangers 2-1, and suddenly you think, oh wait a minute.
Evergreen, the story of Phil O'Donnell.
Have on the phone Paul Byrne.
Obviously Tom Boyd will need no introduction to Celtic supporters.
1991 seen a new style of home kit introduced and became the first to break up the usual hoops design.
He said he paused and says, the game is over. The Rebels have won.
Now we join Chris McGuigan for Part 11 of the series, where he'll cover the period of 1994 to 2000 with his guest, from a Temporary Stand podcast, Mr. Scott McCorry.
It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic overall.
Chapter 11, Celtic Football Club, 1994 to 2000. As the dust settled on the battle for the boardroom, the Celtic support could at long last return their full focus back to matters on the pitch. Victory for Fergus McCann and the Rebels had not only ensured the future of the club, but had renewed hope that the boys could regain their status as a giant in Scottish and European football. But the road to on-field recovery would be a rocky one. Manager Macari survived the takeover of the club, but not for long. He was sacked on June 14, 1994, after only 8 months in the job, and little more than 3 months after the new regime had gained control. McCann stated Macari was sacked because he did not meet certain contractual obligations, including moving to Glasgow rather than commute from England. But the manager was not particularly popular in the dressing room or on the terraces, and it was perhaps natural for the new regime to want their own man in charge. So it was in July 1994, Tommy Burns was appointed manager of Celtic Football Club. Burns had impressed as manager of Kilmarnock, and his return to Parkhead was greeted enthusiastically by delighted Celtic support. Under Burns, Celtic would enchant their support with fast, flowing, attacking football, in the best traditions of the club. During his reign, Tommy would bring to Parkhead a host of exciting, temperamental talents, including Pierre Van Hooijdonk, Judge Cadet, and Paolo Di Canio. These cosmopolitan recruits were coupled with canny domestic buys in the form of Tosh McKinley, Bill O'Donnell, and Jackie McNamara. But the reign of Burns would prove that style and flair was, in the quest for honours, often no substitute for defensive steel and a generous helping of good fortune. As Burns' squad rebuilding commenced, Celtic suffered a painful setback in the final of the 1994 League Cup. The club's trophy drought had looked certain to end as Celtic lined up against the unfancied Raith Rovers at Ibrox. But when an enthralling game finished 2-2, it was the Macari club which emerged victorious after a penalty shootout. Skipper Paul McStay was a man who missed the vital spot kick, a cruel reward for a player who had given so much to the Celtic cause. But redemption would not be far away. On May the 27th, 1995, McStay banished his Raith nightmare as he climbed the steps of Hampden to lift the Scottish Cup. A fine Van Hooijdonk header had given Celtic a 1-0 final victory over Airdrie. It was a hard fought rather than a scintillating victory, but this was one day when style could be deemed irrelevant. Celtic had returned to winning ways, and a near 6-year wait for a trophy was over. In the supposedly paranoid mind of the average Celtic fan, there has long been a deep-rooted suspicion of the motives of the Scottish Football Association. In the mid-1990s, a remarkable series of clashes between SFA head Jim Farry and Fergus McCann would fan the flames of suspicion once more. The first clash occurred in '94 over the appointment of Burns as manager and Billy Stark as his assistant. Both men had resigned from their managerial roles at Kilmarnock, and the Ayrshire club were furious at Celtic's actions. Celtic would be fined by the league £100,000 for the poaching of the duo, and would also be ordered by the SFA to pay double that amount in compensation. It was now McCann's turn to be furious. He argued the scale of the fine was unprecedented, and pointed out that when Rangers tapped up Dundee United's Duncan Ferguson, they were given a punishment of just £5,000. Ultimately, McCann had no option but to stump up the cash. The redevelopment of Celtic Park would spark round 2 of Fergus v Farry. When McCann drew up the proposals for the stadium rebuild, he was told by the SFA Stadium Committee that Celtic would have no choice but to play away from Parkhead for a season. The advice was given on legitimate safety grounds, but McCann was uneasy for the fact that the SFA could make such a decision, given that they, along with Queen's Park, would benefit financially from Celtic's temporary move to Hampden. McCann was further infuriated when he learned that Celtic would not only have to pay an annual rent of £600,000, but that the landlords would also be the ones who would be raking in the cash from catering and programme sales. In a bid to make the National Stadium a little bit more homely for the boys, McCann had hoped to add a few temporary touches to the changing rooms and the ground, which would give it a slightly more Celtic flavour for the Hoops home games. These proposals were refused. It seemed obvious to McCann that while Celtic's money was very welcome, the actual presence at Hampden was barely tolerated. The final battle between the two would be a long and bitter struggle.
Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic overall.
Alright, I'm absolutely delighted to have on the line an old pal of mine, Scott McCorry from the HuddleBoard, from the temporary stand, and everywhere you look under a rock that says Celtic. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Pat. I'm doing very well. How's yourself?
I'm not too bad. You've got the unenvious task of talking about Celtic from July 94 to about February 2000. What do you think about that?
To be honest, people appreciate when I say this. To appreciate the good times, you've got to get through the bad times. And by golly gosh, we went through some of the bad times. But I'll tell you, once we get through it, I was actually having a wee think about it, and you couldn't believe how much happened in that space of time. And as much as the Martin O'Neill years were brilliant and we were winning things and stuff, and that was brilliant and it was the best time of your life, see the fact that it was calm. There was no madness happening. Whereas every summer something mental happened. And I'm going to give you my full appreciation of my time there, because that was my formative years as a Celtic fan. I started going around back without my dad about 94, had my season ticket, first ever season ticket, and I've went ever since. And I'll give you how I felt at that time. And Chris, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you know what I mean?
But Scott, nobody had season tickets before 1984. Nobody I know.
But you know what I mean. Like I kind of never regularly went at that point. Hampden was my first year.
Oh, I can still see Paul Byrne's goal hit the back of the net.
And his huge ass.
So we're going to look at Tommy Burns' reign from July 94 to May 97. We're going to talk about Vim the Tim, July 97 to May 98. Dr. Joe, June 98 to May 99. And we're going to wind up with a wonderful dream team that was going to take us to all sorts of glory with John Barnes and Kenny Dalglish, June 99 to, February 2000. How does that sound?
Fantastic. On you go.
Is your appetite wet?
Oh, yes. Bring back the memories.
All right, Scott, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back to the steps of Celtic Park. We ended up the last chapter with Fergus McCann and Brian Dempsey uttering the famous words, "The Rebels have won." What did you think that day? Where was Celtic going?
Well, to be honest, did we know, but was it the Kellys? No, so it was better. It didn't matter, right? And I think there's a wee bit of revisionism going with Celtic fans with regards who comes in and votes Celtic. As I remember that point, I was saying that I was only a young guy. You just didn't want the board to have the old board, as they're now called, forever immortalised as the old board. I listened to the podcast before this one, and honest to God, it does fling it back to you talking about Cassidy and stuff like that, and that gormless twat down in Cambuslang. Like, I'm from Cambuslang, and I remember all about the toxic waste. You know what I mean? So Fergus came in. The great thing about Fergus was I'd never heard of him, but a mate of mine, mine's dad used to take us regularly to the games, and he remembered Fergus McCann coming up to him, I think it was about 1988, 89, with an original plan. Mm-hmm. So that all sounded right. And the fact that Cassidy was there as well, my dad wouldn't have been a great fan of Cassidy. He thought he was a chancer. And I don't know if my opinion sways for that, to be perfectly honest. We know we're always a wee bit swayed by what your dad thinks. But, I mean, Cassidy was in the door and out the door as quick as you know. But we all thought it was going to be the start of something brilliant. It was something different. It was a future. It was where we're going. He was talking all the right talk, and he wanted the club in our hands. And he was talking about a new stadium, which we need and stuff. Of course, everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and it was the only bandwagon that we jumped on.
So on the line today, I have David Lowe, and David is going to talk about the Fergus takeover and where we actually went after Fergus arrived in office. Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm very well.
David, we've been working on this podcast now for a few months, and we've went from the beginning of the club, and in chapter 10, which was our last episode, we got to Brian Dempsey and Fergus McCann standing on the steps of Celtic Park and declaring their Rebels have won. Do you remember those days?
Well, I remember it very vividly indeed, because it was one of the biggest days in Celtic's history. It felt like that at the time, and it feels even more like that, thinking back. I mean, that really was the culmination of 2 years of trying to sort Celtic out, the problems out, all the problems facing Celtic, and it all came together on the 4th of March on a very wet March day. But that was really, with hindsight, that was really only the start of the journey, because a whole lot of work had to get done. I don't think really any fan that wasn't involved really appreciates, what happened that day and what had happened over the previous 5 days. What happened over the previous 5 days was that the board finally caved in. They basically came clean and said, we've run out of money. We have no more money. We can't pay the wages. We can't continue to operate. The bank is going to foreclose on us unless we can come up with some money. So we need that money now, not in a matter of weeks. We need it now. And, after 2 years of fighting these guys, I'm talking about the former board, the old board, this was amazing to hear. I mean, they really were. We didn't even realize Celtic were that desperate, but they were, and they came cap in hand. Well, half the board did. I mean, it's a long story, and we've probably not got time to go into all the detail. But half the board or so came to us, and I'm talking about Kevin Kelly, who was the chairman at the time, and I'm talking about Jack McGinn, who was the former chairman, and I'm talking about Tom Grant, who was the commercial director. They came to our loose group and said, it's over, we need money. And, that's really when everything swung into action.
So this group that you're talking about, who was the group and what role did David Lowe play in that group, if anybody doesn't know?
Well, my role was principally as an advisor, a corporate advisor. I'd been involved in previous corporate contested situations, and I'd been working in London and Edinburgh, and in 1991, I'd come back to Glasgow. With some money, I suppose I'd done sort of pretty well, and I determined I was going to get involved and only get involved in things that I enjoyed. And things that I enjoyed were basically Celtic and music. So I sort of focused on Celtic and music, and I was more than aware at the time as a financial guy that there was a revolution of sorts happening across the river at Ibrox, and what I mean by that is that David Murray had come in 1988 and started spending a whole lot more money in the team, bringing in a whole lot of English internationalists who couldn't play in Europe because English clubs were banned. Rangers at the time, had a stadium which complied with the Taylor report. I mean, I'm not sure everybody now in this day and age will remember that, the Thatcher government, after a few unfortunate events in stadiums, people dying, forced football to have all-seated stadia. And, Rangers at that stage had all-seated stadia. They had a millionaire or a multi-millionaire, I'm not sure what he is or was, in control of them, and they were spending money like hell. Our guys on the other side of the city, weren't as, the board I'm talking about, weren't as talented as Murray. Didn't have the money that Murray had. We didn't have the seats in the stadium that Rangers had. But what we tried to do was copy them. And, we brought in our green Souness in the shape of Liam Brady. And we tried to copy them with buying players. But the difference is that we didn't have the money to buy the players. And, we started racking up losses. And when I came back to Glasgow to answer your question, I sort of looked at the accounts and came to the conclusion, my God, unless something happens here, Celtic are going to hit the buffers. So what I did was I sort of pointed this out to the board at the time, and they said, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but we don't believe you. We're the mighty Celtic. We've been here forever, and we'll always be here forever, and we don't have a problem, so please shut up and please go away. So, that was just rubbish. I mean, it was absolutely clear that Celtic were heading for bankruptcy, and if the board, weren't going to do anything about it, we had a problem. So what I then did was look at, and you can get all this information from Companies House, look at who really owned Celtic. Nobody had checked, but everybody assumed there was a mysterious little old lady in Ireland, owned the club, or that three, and there's an element of truth in that, which if you're interested, I can talk about later. Or if they didn't believe about the little old lady in Ireland, they believed that the three families, the Whites, the Kellys, and the Grants, had it all sewn up, and there was absolutely nothing that could be done about it. But when I started analysing the share register, who owned the shares, it became pretty clear that nobody controlled the shares. Nobody had a controlling interest in the club. And that if you approach the people that owned the club, all these disparate shareholders all over the world, and you basically told the shareholders, you went direct to the shareholders rather than through the board, and you told them, in what dire straits Celtic were, you could get their support and maybe force change upon the board. So that was my plan. But just as it is today, with Rangers, the most important thing of all that was required was money. It's all very well having a good idea. It's all very well being very clever and identifying what the problems are. But having identified what those problems were, you then have to come up with a solution. And that solution, I'm afraid, is always down to money. So we needed money.
So, David, just 1 second. So just to backtrack a little bit. So you're saying you had this plan, you presented it to the board. What right had you to go and talk to the board about a financial plan, and who was with you whenever you wanted to do this?
Well, at this stage that I've just referred to there, I'm on my own. I've not been living in Glasgow for a while. Although I'm going to games, in Glasgow, I'm just going with my friends to the stand, or the terracing as it was known in those days, standing. So I'm not mixing with all the hoi polloi, but I've been watching Celtic for, at this stage for like 25 years. And
so that further prompts my question, well, why would they listen to a guy that really had, who didn't have a position within the club? Why would they listen to David Lowe?
Well, there's two reasons for that, and I've got to watch that I don't sound too immodest here. I mean, I did have a profile. I was one of the youngest chairmen of a stock exchange listed company at this stage. I wasn't an entirely unknown quantity. So I was sort of known in business circles and stock market circles and investment circles. So it wasn't a stranger, calling them up, cold calling them out the blue and saying arrogantly, hey, you guys have got a big problem here. I did have some status in the marketplace, so it wasn't a problem. Them, having this meeting or meetings with them and telling them what I thought as a qualified investment analyst, with experience in the city, it wasn't, that's what I'm saying is plausible. And it was actually true, as it turned out to be, But, what I absolutely and utterly underestimated was the old board's absolute and utter determination to stay in control of Celtic at almost any cost. They considered that they were Celtic. They considered that they, the board, were indistinguishable from Celtic, synonymous with each other, and that Celtic was their right, their heirloom, and they were never going to give that up. For that reason, and the fact that they didn't quite believe it was as bad as I was saying it was. But, Chris, at this stage, I'm just sort of approached the board my own. I'm not mixing with all the other personalities, that subsequently come out the woodwork. But, I did one by one find out, there were other moneyed Celtic fans who shared the problem, but they didn't have the sort of corporate or experience or and takeovers that I had. So that was my principal asset here. My principal involvement was, hey, we all agree we've got a problem. Here's the plan to solve the problem. One, these guys are not going to go of their own volition because they don't recognize there's a problem. Two, we have to force them out, because if we don't force them out, the likely outcome is dire, i.e. Celtic going the Rangers' way, bust, So we can't just sit back and let this happen. We must do something about it. And here's the plan. This is what we should do. Number one, we should go and speak to all the shareholders that the board treat like idiots, I'll call it that, and see what their attitude is. And if they agree with us and they want to do something about it, we will get their support. If they don't care, we will offer to buy their shares. So we need a sum of money to buy shares. We would then end up with a very meaningful shareholding in the company. If we're lucky, we'd have a controlling interest, and we would then seek to replace the board with our own guys.
So, David, tell me, this group that you're talking about, who was the group, and what was the glue that brought you together? And whenever you got together, what was it like? Where were you going with all this?
Well, the first person that I was introduced to by a mutual friend, was Brian Dempsey. He did have a profile because the old board had thrown Brian off the board roughly a year before. From memory, I would think it was 1991. So Brian had been brought onto the board by a faction on the board, then been unceremoniously thrown off the board by the other faction on the board. So I was introduced to him, and Brian was, and I told him what we agreed there was a problem, obviously, and I told him what this plan was. He then said, "Well, I want you to meet my business partner." At the time, and his business partner at the time was John Keane, who stayed in Edinburgh. So I was introduced to John Keane, and he, was involved in the various different discussions and meetings that took place over a matter of weeks. And I'd say that was the initial small group. But none of these guys really had the amount of money required to solve Celtic's problems. Celtic needed, millions and millions of pounds. And I don't think I know, that neither Brian Dempsey nor John Keane, had that amount of money, or indeed pretended to have that amount of money. So we still needed a money man. And it was suggested that I go and meet this slightly eccentric guy in Canada called Fergus McCann, who seemed seriously concerned about Celtic's problems and was prepared to put his money where his mouth was. So, I went and met Fergus in Montreal in his apartment, and I come into his apartment and he said, straight to the point, and I love people that are straight to the point. He said, "Okay, sit down, Mr. Lowe. Who are you? Why are you here? And who do you represent?" Wow. Anyway, I told him, who I was and who else was involved, and what the plan was. But Fergus wasn't keen on spending money in buying out the old board. He considered that the old board, had got Celtic into this problem. They'd been knocking him back for 3 years. He'd been offering Celtic money and assistance for 3 years prior to this, from the late 80s, and they just wanted rid of him. So he was adamant that he wasn't prepared to buy any of their shares off them. But, that any money he had, and he had, like £10 million kitty, to invest in Celtic, all of his money was going into Celtic for the benefit of Celtic, and not to the people that got Celtic into this state. But he did say it's a great plan. I wish you luck. Keep me informed. And if you succeed in your endeavours, we should get together, because I'm right up for investing up to £10 million in Celtic, and that's what happened. So that was at the very genesis, the very beginning. Now, it was always a very loose group, I have to tell you. There's no sugarcoating here. Nobody really got on with anybody. You're talking about big personalities. You're seeing it at Rangers just now. Petty jealousies, jockeying for position, It was all the only thing, quite frankly, that bound everybody together was the fact that we were Celtic fans.
The one thing we touched on briefly in the last podcast was Fergus McCann coming in here, and everybody knew kind of the plan that Fergus had. Kind of sort of. It sort of changed a little bit that we forget about over the years of history, but it changed a wee bit. But at that time, he didn't come in promising, billions of pounds to compete in Europe and destroy Rangers and, buy, £50 million players and put them on the park. He was very quiet and very modest. And when he came in, he gave that order that, okay, I'm going to organise things and the rest of it, the football guys will look after.
Well, it was a business plan, wasn't it, Chris? It wasn't, as you say, it wasn't bravado. All the years we've seen these multitudes of people come into football promising the world and generally letting fans down. Fergus McCann came in with a plan, and it was very much a business plan. He'd worked out the figures. He saw what the fans could have given to the club and what the club could give out to it. He was never going to let it get. So it was very much sensible. I think that would be the best way to describe it. It was sensible, wasn't it?
Absolutely. You look at the Sure issue, which he talked about, which was a success, right? He talked about rebuilding the stadium, and even to this day, I would say a lot of us have a wee model of Celtic Park, either on your nightstand beside your bed or on your desk and work, whatever. We're all so proud of the stadium, and he did deliver that as well, probably beyond our wildest dreams. Better than the plans for Cambuslang, like Scott.
Exactly, but what Celtic Park was a football stadium. It wasn't. It was basically relying on us turning up every week to watch the Celtic, whereas Cambuslang was based on Bruce Springsteen sticking money in for a big stage at the end and all these shops and stuff like that. Fair dues maybe in the future, but by golly, and the sad thing was, we looked out and we hoped for Cambuslang, and if you look back at what Cambuslang was, it was pretty damn ridiculous, wasn't it?
In hindsight, it was, but I remember reading it in the Celtic View and thinking, wow, this is magic.
Exactly.
The other thing he was very good at the very beginning was he talked about investing in the youth policy and sort of going back to the Celtic tradition of bringing through players and all that kind of stuff as well. And I think that was mildly successful. But where I really admire Fergus McCann was the fact that he took on the SFA and didn't bend a knee when things were wrong. He said they were wrong.
But he was clever, wasn't he? He wasn't just a stubborn wee idiot. He was a clever guy. And even when he took on UEFA with regards the Monaco thing and John Collins, we're going to come to that later, but you think about the John Collins thing, he was saying, well, they're getting tax breaks because they're a principality, yet they're signing him and they're not even in Europe, so we should really be getting money. Stuff like that. The way he done the SFA, and the fact is, he never done it just out of a bitterness thing, and he never done it just as a pro-Celtic thing. He done it out of, you're conning me, I'm not taking it. And that, you're 100%, that's going to be respected.
And for the first time in a long time, probably since the likes of the flag debate and stuff, Celtic actually stood up for what they stood for. And Fergus at that time, I thought, was very admirable. However, being from across the water, particularly, he also championed the Boys Against Bigotry. Yeah. And here we are in 2013, and you see, equal opportunities and political correctness and all this here kind of stuff, and you see no room in football for sectarianism and things like that. See, at the time, Scott, that divided the Celtic support left and right.
It divided that Celtic support at a time where it didn't need to be divided. When was it? January 1996, he started Boys Against Bigotry, and as I remember, it was dead on. He wanted rid of the Boys of the Old Brigade, and he wanted rid of IRA chants. And let's be honest about it, they were prominent at Celtic Park. That's how I learned them, to be totally truthful about it.
But lots of our age are all the same when it comes to that, Scott. But do you not remember the tension when songs like that did start? There was punch-ups in the stand.
Exactly. It's still, there's a living legacy towards it just now. Because Fergus McCann, the way I saw it, Chris, and I very much see it the same as yourself, to be perfectly honest, he was standing pointing fingers at us. And that allowed the media and the press as a whole to join in. They were already pointing fingers at us. They were already blaming us for anything wrong on the planet. But one of our own guy, had stood up and pointed the finger at us. And as you said, when you're in the stadium, you've got the guys who think, no, I'm doing what I want. And you've got other guys going, no, the club comes first. And neither one of them are wrong, to be perfectly honest.
With the arrival of Fergus McCann in March 1994, his plans for the stadium moved quickly. Although initially working with Brian Dempsey, there was never any suggestion of Rob Royston being back on the table, as McCann knew upgrading the existing stadium was the way to go. Ironically, his vision was not a million miles away from the one shown by the old board in the Celtic View in 1990. Indeed, Fergus McCann had already been ahead of the game. Having initially tried to invest in Celtic during the 1992-93 season, McCann had arrived at Celtic Park with a surveyor and had asked permission to enter the ground and take measurements. The old board had, of course, refused this request, but McCann persisted, and through a combination of a walk around the perimeter of the ground and old postcard aerial shots of the stadium, he was able to gather enough information to have an architect draw up reconstruction plans. These initial concept drawings were produced as a report in July 1993 by Bucknell Austin Project Management Consultants in conjunction with Hutter, Jennings and Titchmarsh Consulting Engineers and Rayner Associates Chartered Architects. There would be some changes to the concept along the way, including the flattening of the originally conceived curved ends and the roof steelwork moving to outside the roof cladding as with many other modern UK stadia, but the overall plan would remain relatively unchanged over the coming years, and a comparison between the visual renderings and the finished stadium are obvious. During the 1994-95 season, Celtic played their home matches at Hampden Park, as Celtic Park was all but razed to the ground. Only the main stand remained as the east and west terracing, as well as the beloved jungle, made way for progress. A giant new north stand was constructed on the site of the old jungle, seating 26,970 spectators. Despite the tight space offered at Jane Field Street with the eastern necropolis behind it, the stand was designed to overhang the street and even the graveyard. To fund the project, McCann changed the club from the private limited company it had been since 1897 to a public limited company. The Celtic Football and Athletic Company Limited became Celtic plc. To retain control of the old private company name, which was still visible on the main stand's red brick frontage among other places, McCann created a subsidiary company of the plc initially called Pacific Shelf 595 Limited until the change of name took place in December 1994. With the club now a plc, McCann could now launch a share issue which would allow the supporters of Celtic to own a piece of their own club. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to know how successful the share issue would be, and as such, the north stand was built with the roof supported by pillars inside the top tier of the seating area. A more expensive alternative was available that would have involved the use of more steel to wrap the roof cantilevers around the underside of the seating deck, but this was deemed an unnecessary expenditure. McCann need not have worried though, as the share issue in January 1995 was the most successful for a football club in the UK at that time, raising £14 million. With the mammoth new stand complete, the brand new pitch was also ready to go and had a nod to the past as once more shamrock-laden turf was brought from Donegal and placed in the centre of the pitch just as Michael Davitt had done back in 1892. That allowed Celtic to return home in August 1995, where Rod Stewart officially opened the new stand before Celtic faced Newcastle United in a 1-1 draw. While the season at Hampden had seen the return of silverware for the first time in 6 years, everyone from supporter to player to management and above was glad to be home once more. During the 1995-96 season, the demand for tickets to see Celtic was such that a temporary stand was erected at the west end of the stadium. While dwarfed by the north stand, the small uncovered temporary stand could hold 3,000 spectators. Meanwhile, away supporters were housed at the eastern end of the new north stand. Indeed, there are photos of those early days of the modern stadium which show Rangers supporters standing in section 111, the same section which is today home to the Green Brigade. Additionally, other photos exist which show people sitting on the roofs of the tenements of Dalriada Street, watching the matches through the gaping hole of the east end of the stadium. However, such opportunities would not last for long. In the summer of 1996, the new East Stand was opened by Billy Connolly. This latest stand could hold 13,000 spectators, and with the addition of the southeast corner, the away supporters would now be housed in a more permanent location. As with the North Stand opening, the East Stand was opened against English opposition. This time it was Arsenal who would face Celtic, but on this occasion Celtic would come from behind to win 2-1. The tenements themselves would not be there much longer either. With the gigantic new stadium taking shape, Glasgow Council chiefs announced in May 1996 that the tenements in Dalriada Street and Janefield Street would be pulled down. Although the cost to the taxpayer would be £865,000, the residents of the tenements saw it more as a blessing, as they claimed the new stadium made the rest of the area look like a tip, as well as suffering from a lack of sunlight and a lack of car parking during games. Due to a dispute with Scottish Power over the redirecting of power lines around the new shape of stadium, it would be another 2 years after the completion of the East Stand that Celtic Park's 60,000 capacity would be completed with the opening of the West Stand. The final sections of the stadium were completed in 2 phases, the first of which saw the southwest corner being completed in February 1998. In addition, translucent sheets necessary to allow sunlight to reach the playing surface and ensure the grass would grow normally were added to the roof of the main stand. With the southwest corner in place, the temporary stand was dismantled to make way for the second part of the final phase. As Harold Bratback clinched Celtic's first league title in 10 years, the goal was scored in front of a construction site ahead of the West Stand's completion in August 1998. Unlike the opening of the North and East Stands, the opening of the West Stand had no fanfare or specially arranged friendly. Instead, the opening of this final stand saw Celtic return to the European Cup for the first time in a decade. Sadly, the 0-0 draw against the champions of Ireland, St Pat's Athletic, was hardly fitting for the newly finished stadium, even if the Irish connection was at least in some way fitting. With the £40 million redevelopment complete and the stadium now standing taller than ever before, Celtic Park was once more a ground befitting the stature of the club. While the 1990s had been a dark decade for the club, things were finally starting to look bright once more.
And I know a lot of people listening to this, today in 2013, won't understand just the feelings that there was at the time. And this isn't revisionist history. This is factual. This is what happened when we were there in the temporary stands and in the new North Stand. It was hugely divisive. And yes, you're probably sitting here in 2013 saying, well, maybe there's a case for not having those types of songs at Celtic Park. And that's probably true today, right? But in 1984, this was a whole new world, and that can't be understated.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, the big thing that he pushed, it's still there. I mean, it was the initiatives that came following it, the social mission production, stating the club's position, the publicly promoted anti-sectarianism through the media and press. Right? See me perfectly on, anti-sectarianism's brilliant, it's perfect, right? But then to decry the Celtic fans themselves and call them sectarian without a debate, that was hard. That was hard to take, I felt. I mean, I was a young guy, I was coming through it, I was singing these songs. You're quite right. Who is a 16, 17-year-old boy sitting there singing a song that we've sang for years, and then all of a sudden this big burly guy says, "Oh, you." Where do you go for there?
And it was a mark of the man too. I mean, to be fair to him, he did approach the sticky issues head on. And when you look when he moved in, it wasn't long before Lou Macari got his jotters because he wasn't good enough for Celtic, and he brought in Tommy Burns and fought with Kilmarnock and got his man. So to be fair to him, when he made his mind up to do something, Fergus done it.
Yeah, 100%.
But that relationship with Tommy Burns from the very beginning was a bit frosty, as I remember it.
I think so as well, yeah.
And here was this hero coming back, Tommy Burns, right? Coming back to save the club. All the jigsaw pieces are falling into place, apart from the final piece, which was Harold Bratback, and that was to come later. But when we had the whole beginning of the stadium, and we were moving back from Hampden, and Tommy Burns as manager, it was great to be a Celtic supporter at that stage, wasn't it?
Tommy had that aura about him, that he was one of your own. He was 100% one. There was no doubt in this earth that he was one of your guys, and there he was standing up, and he talked the talk, and we're going to come to it again, as we say, Chris, right? But what Tommy Burns did initially, he went out and surrounded himself with Celtic men. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? He, as I remember, I think Lou Macari had released Paddy Bonner, he'd released Charlie Nicholas, and the first things that Tommy Burns did went, boom, used to. He had Billy Stark beside him, he had another Celtic man, albeit maybe an Aberdeen man, but you know what I mean? The backroom staff was all Celtic guys who'd been there for years and stuff. He surrounded himself. So the feel-good factor was there. Feel-good factor was there.
It was, and then we came racing to win our first trophy against Wraith Rovers in the Coca-Cola Cup final on the 27th of November. And here we were, at long last, the trophy famine was over. The last time I was at Ibrox.
What can you say about that night? That was. I'd only been to one cup final before that, Chris, and it was the 1988. Frankie McAvenny scored the two. So I was only a buck there. So this is my first game, my first season, going everywhere myself. Had my mates and stuff, so I went to this game. And what a disappointment, man! And for so many reasons, that heroes, like what happened to Paul McStay. I don't know Paul McStay let us down that day, missing a penalty. But you would never wish that on Paul McStay, would you? You've scored. No. I mean, where did we score? When did Charlie Nicholas score the 86th minute? And
then he scored 84 minutes.
Straight after it, jeez, it was heartbreaking. Honest to God. Heartbreaking. As a young guy, I came home and I remember I didn't speak to my man and dad for about 2 days, and my dad just kept laughing because he's like, "I've been there, son, I've been there."
That was your apprenticeship, Scott, so it was.
It was heartbreaking. I thought the world collapsed on top of me. I really did. I remember that.
If anybody thinks we do revisionist history on the Celtic History podcast, we would have glossed that day out of the history of Celtic completely, because that was the one day, coming back in the boat to Belfast, was the only time in all my years supporting Celtic, coming back in the boat, and we'd lost the Rangers, and we'd lost, the big important matches and European games. That was the only time, coming back in the boat, there was silence.
Silence, aye.
Dreadful.
And it had to happen at Midden as well, didn't it? Had to happen at Ibrox and Gordon Dalziel and the whole, and the thing was the whole country. I mean, they never ever want Celtic to win, but the whole country all support Wraith Rovers, and they were wearing blue and white.
And Jimmy Nicholl was their manager.
I don't think I drank Coca-Cola for a year.
So, you've just met Fergus, you're going back to Glasgow. What was the plan at that stage? Because yes, you've got a backer that might invest up to 10 million quid in Celtic. Where did that leave you?
Yeah.
Well, right, okay.
Would and did.
Would and did. We know that in hindsight. But at that time, you didn't know for sure because you hadn't got a pound in your pocket from Fergus McCann. But anyway, so you're back to Glasgow. What's the plan now?
Yeah, well, the plan is that I go back to Glasgow and say, right, Fergus is definitely up for investing in Celtic if we can succeed in getting these guys out, but he's not prepared to reward the board, for getting Celtic into the state. So at this stage, what happens is that John Keane says, well, I'm prepared to, buy shares from any shareholder that wants to sell their shares. Mm-hmm. And there was Brian Dempsey, he's John's partner, so Brian's involved in it as well because he's John's partner. Then I was putting money in as doing the same thing, buying shares. John's Keane's son, Mark, and this was the main initial grouping. So I would then highlight and target shareholders to speak to, and I have to tell you that the first place I went was to I think it's Derrimore Road in Belfast, and met a shareholder there, and she was an elderly lady, had no real interest in Celtic. She had inherited the shares from her father, and she just wanted to sell the shares, and we bought her shares, and that was us off within a week. So we had achieved and I have to tell you, Ireland played a very big part in this. The very first shareholding that was purchased, as I said, from a shareholder in Belfast. Then, through analysis, worked out that when old Tom Grant died, and you'll know from your previous chapters the role that he played, when he died, his shares went three ways. It went to ultimately his grandson Tom, who was a Celtic director. He got half of them, and half of them ended up with 5 shareholders in the north of Ireland, around the Tombridge area.
Right.
So I had a meeting with all 5 of them in Tombridge. I also met a shareholder in Cushendall, and all of them, wanted to keep their shares, you'll be pleased to hear, and support our rebellion against the board. So the Irish were on board from the very beginning. And the final quarter of Tom Grant's shares, were in Montreal with Tom Grant's aunts, James Grant's aunts. And they were rock solid. They had a guy called Jim Doherty, who was looking after the family shareholdings, and they were rock solid behind the rebellion, if we can call it that. So, just in a matter of weeks, we already represented, over 15% of Celtic's ownership. Now, there was another key shareholding. Former chairman Tom Devlin died in 1986. His wife had a big shareholding, Betty Devlin, in Edinburgh. And again, she was rock solid for change, with like another 15%. So after 4 weeks on the road, I'm in control of 30% of Celtic, going, this is fantastic.
And did the old board get wind of this? Did they know what was going on?
At this stage, this is key. At this stage, this is all below the radar. This is all below the radar. You are taking a risk when you speak to a shareholder, because you don't know when you're finished whether he's going to be supporting the board, picking up the phone and telling the board that this guy called Lowe's going around the world picking up Celtic shares to try and throw you out. But it became apparent, or always becomes apparent when you're talking to someone very quickly, what their angle is, what their attitude is. You can tell with their body language and the way that they greet you. And as I said, the lady in Dermore Road, in Belfast, it became apparent within 5 minutes that she just wanted out. It became apparent within 5 minutes that the shareholders in the Tombridge area, were just wanted to keep their shares and get rid of these bastards that had ruined the club. And ditto with the family in Toronto, and the same with Betty Devlin, and so there wasn't really any risk, and we've gone from 0 to 30% in a matter of weeks, and it's looking great. But you're having to widen the circle now. You're having to deal with smaller shareholdings. You're having to deal with people you're less sure about. And in those circumstances, what you're really seeing is the risk of the board finding out what's going on is becoming greater.
It's quite amazing to listen to you talk like that, David. And you hear about the people you approached, and some people sold, and some people supported you. And then you can hear that always playing in the back of your mind, somebody's going to say no and left the phone and call the club. But that didn't actually happen.
Well, it hadn't happened at this stage, but it did happen in due course. So I'll tell you about that in a minute, because I've got to watch stock, or I could be on speaking to you for like 6 hours. So I'm missing big chunks out, but we're basically at 30% with no leak, no risk. But we're widening the circle, and the possibility of the board getting to know is increasing all the time. And you're dealing with smaller amounts of shares now, so you're putting a lot of effort in for a lot more risk and a lot less shares. But we managed to get up to about 40% with no risk. If not no risk, without the board finding out. So at this stage, we own 40% of Celtic, and the board know nothing about it. And all the money for buying these shares that were bought come from John Keane, who's a real Celtic hero, I might add. He's still on the board just now. He was there at the beginning, and he's been there ever since.
And he unfurled the flag.
Yeah, so John's basically bankrolling this, probably about 80% of it, and myself and a few other people are sort of taking up the slack. But it's John Keane that's supplying all the money, and and all the time this is happening. Well, it's not come into the public domain yet, but it's about to, because you asked about the board finding out. So there was two things happened that made the board find out. The first thing is that we went to a shareholder in Glasgow, told them the story, how Celtic were in trouble. We had to do something about it. We've got the money to do something about it. And they indicated that they agreed with us and they would support us. But what they actually did was call up the board and say, do you know about this? So the board found out about it. But they didn't do too much about it other than buy a couple of shares themselves, some shares themselves. The main thing that got the board into action was, and I remember this, I was in Cushendall with Jim Doherty from Toronto. We just bought a shareholding. It's Friday night. We're in a bar and watching STV, which you can get on the coast. I don't know if you know this.
I do know that. I remember turning my aerial around to get it.
And Big Jim had done an interview with Jerry McNee, because this is leaking out now. And he said more than he should have. McNee's a very good journalist, and he managed to get a lot more out of Jim than was sensible. And I do know that when the board saw that programme, which used to go out on a Friday night, that's the very point that they knew that this was a serious threat to their position. And that's when they started trying to buy a few shares. That's when it all came into the public domain, and that's where we ended up fighting them for the best part of 2 years.
All right, we're going to move on from that, because it was too dark a day to talk about it. It's there, and it's a big pimple on her backside.
Yeah.
So Tommy then moves into the hot seat and starts to make a few interesting signings.
I touched on it there, Chris, right? And the Wraith Rovers game is very relevant. It's very relevant, right? Tommy Burns came in, and as I said to you, he signed Paddy Bowen, he signed Charlie Nicholas, but he signed Phil O'Donnell, who was a big Celtic man. Andy Walker had come back to the club just before, right? He came in the summer, and he'd also got Tosh McKinley in. So he actually tried to sign Andy Millen as well, who was at Kilmarnock at the time. So he was signing all these. He basically wanted this team full of Celtic men, and he had that. He had all these guys who loved Celtic. You obviously had the Maestro in there. You had Peter Grant in there. You had these guys. And see the Wraith Rovers game. I remember he changed tack. You knew he was hurting as much as us. However, he looked at it and went, I've now got to look outside the box here. I mean, I think Loudrup would have been at Ibrox at that point.
Yeah, he just arrived, yes.
Yeah, so and he definitely was there, because I think he destroyed us at Hampden, didn't he? But we signed Pierre, and Big Pierre, Chris, as I said to you, remember that you lived through this, so you remember the most exotic player we had at the time was Rudy Vara. I mean, a refugee. You know what I mean? And you had a couple in our time with a couple of Polish guys or something, but like Aberdeen and Dundee United seem to be signing all these Dutch guys and these Swedish guys and stuff. And then we got Pierre in January, and things started changing. And I don't think that could be understated, that he was your first big. I mean, you have to go back to Shuggy Valdison, to a big striker, a big foreign striker. And this is before the internet. No, this is we didn't know who this guy was.
I couldn't even pronounce his name. For the first few weeks, he was pure honky dunk to me.
He was aye, Huggy, they were called. I'll tell you what, before we carry on, do you know his real name is Petrus Fernandinus Johannes van Hooydonk?
See, that's what I love about people coming on this podcast. They actually do go away and do some homework. Congratulations to you, my friend.
Right, that's it. Don't expect nothing else.
Give you the one known by Henrik Larsson.
What was your impressions about Celtic when you signed from Feyenoord in 1997? Did you know much about them at the time?
I didn't know that very much. I know a little bit because Pierre van Hooydonk was playing there. I was playing in Holland, so they used to show something on the sports channel there. I obviously heard about the name before, but I didn't know that much about Scottish football. So my first impression was, I didn't have that much. I didn't know that much, so I just wanted to stay with an open mind, and I wanted to get my football back on track because before I left to Holland, I was scoring a lot of goals and played well, and then I left for Holland. I did okay, but not as well as I wanted. So I just wanted to get my career back on track, and I think I managed to do that. No, I mean, a lot of people talk about what was a huge club, and you started to realize that when you saw about the media attention and everything, and the fans that were there, and the way the people were talking about the club. So when I arrived there, I mean, I didn't know how big Celtic was, but when I left, I knew how big Celtic is.
How much of an influence was Jim Janssen on you signing for Celtic?
I think without him I wouldn't have gone to Celtic because he knew that I had a clause in my contract to go to another club for not that much of money, and he was the one who signed me down to Holland as well. So I knew that he believed in me, and I needed somebody who did that because I mean when I wasn't fine, he left straight away or more or less, and I played in many different positions, and I didn't really get one position. But when I knew that I would get that chance playing for Wim Janssen again, because he knew where I was at my best. So I mean, without him, I wouldn't be there.
Was there any time during the rehab that you thought your career might have been at an end?
No, not at all. I mean, I had Brian Scott working next to me on a daily basis. And I mean, the insurance I got from him was good enough for me. I was working away, just keeping my head down and trying to work. You're always worried, will you get back? But I knew that I would come back, but I didn't know when. But the rehab went so well. I mean, I was playing again after I think 5.5 months. I was playing 5 months. I was playing reserve team football. And then I played the last game of the season, and then I went to the European Championship, and there I scored, and I was good physically, could stand up. I took a knock on my leg straight away. I knew it would not go off again. So it was just a question of preparing for the next season. And Mr. O'Neill came. He brought in some fantastic players, Chris Sutton. I mean, the rest is history, really, because I have started off and I never stopped scoring.
Do you think a leg break like that is something that you have to get over psychologically?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, mentally you have to. I mean, if you're worried about things, you will never go into tackle again. But I got a knock straight on when I played in the European Championship, so I knew it wasn't sore. So once you got that knock, then you just to go on with it. But everybody's different. But that's the way I work anyway. So
I remember every time you used to get tackled and you would fall down, you were lying on the ground, the whole ground was always quiet in case there was something wrong again. There was panic stations.
But I mean, I very rarely stayed down. If I get a proper tackle, I'll try to get up again because I didn't want to show the opponent that it was hurting. But that's the way. That's what you have to do in order to make the defenders just feel awkward to play again.
So I think Greg Moore tested that a couple of times, didn't he?
Oh, he did. I mean, he got his back. I remember kicking him at Ibrox, and the referee Hugh Dallas didn't do anything.
Most of the football greats out past the parkhead skates want to play football like Glasgow.
But the season 84-85 ended on a high note at last. The Scottish Cup final. Celtic won, Erdry 0, Big Pierre through the air, 1-0.
Yes. Outstanding.
I'd forgotten how to celebrate.
And Peter Grant won Player of the Year, Man of the Match that day as well.
Well, some people call that the Peter
Grant podcast.
Some people call that the Peter Grant final.
That's right, because he ran back and kicked Alan Lawrence, I think his name was. Let's be honest about it, Chris, right? It wasn't a great game. Big Pierre's goal was a smasher. We won 1-0 against, I think, Airdrie were first division at the time. All it's going to be said is we won a trophy, thank Christ for that.
It was an awful game. Yeah. Absolutely awful. But the elation at the final whistle was something to behold, wasn't it?
Yeah, wholeheartedly, aye. It was honest to God, like, you think you win a trophy now, you're happy, go back to the pub with your mates, yes. But that was a day for standing in the ground for a good hour and a half, hugging your mate as he cried in your shoulder. One of the cup finals, do you know what I mean? Tommy Burns was greeting, Paul McStay was greeting, Peter Grant was greeting. Brilliant.
Brilliant. I'm sitting here looking at a photograph of the Scottish Cup winning team still at the stadium, and the expressions on their face range from, as you say, elation to disbelief.
Aye, to relief.
Aye, relief. And we were back then. I mean, it was all changed. We were getting ready to conquer the world after that, weren't we?
And the mad thing is, I went out and I slaughtered every Hunter out. I mean, you've not won a trophy in I don't know many years, and you're like, yes, we're the best team in the world.
And even them singing for so long, you'll never lift a trophy, Paul McStay. That was the day, stop that.
I know. Aye.
Smashing times.
And Celtic last, and Celtic overall.
It started in February 1996, and Celtic, pushing for a league and cup double, attempted to bolster their squad with the signing of Sporting Lisbon striker Georges Cadet. When, on February 26, a personal agreement was reached with the player, Celtic forwarded all the required paperwork to the SFA. No concerns were raised by the SFA, so when the international clearance certificate arrived on March the 7th and was forwarded to the national body, it was assumed the transfer would be processed as a matter of course. However, the SFA now expressed concern about the compensation arrangements between Celtic and Sporting, and Farry claimed until these were resolved, he regarded the international clearance certificate as invalid. The SFA then informed Celtic that because Cadet had also entered into a separate financial arrangement with Sporting regarding his payoff, the original player agreement was also unsatisfactory. They subsequently asked Celtic to make a number of specific changes. But when the club submitted a revised agreement, it was returned once more by the SFA, who were now unhappy with various other points of the deal that they had previously had no issue with. Meanwhile, a fax from FIFA was received, stating that having looked at the details of the deal, they had no concerns and the international clearance certificate should be regarded as valid from March the 7th. An SFA management meeting accepted this, but amazingly, Celtic were ordered once more to make changes to their personal agreement with the player, as the SFA yet again voiced concerns about elements of the contract they had previously had no worries about. On March the 30th, Celtic were once more forced to make further changes to the agreement, but at last, the transfer was registered and cleared. However, the SFA refused to backdate their ratification of the transfer, meaning Cadet missed the 2-1 Scottish Cup defeat to Rangers. During a period of a delay, Celtic had played and drawn 2 league games, 1-1 at Rangers and 0-0 at Motherwell. When the striker was finally able to take to the field, he would score 5 goals in 6 games. was not enough to maintain Celtic's challenge for silverware, and with Rangers securing an 8th successive league title, angry Hoops fans were left wondering what might have been if Cadet's registration had not been delayed. McCann was raging at the seemingly needless delay of the transfer. Vary was held personally responsible by the Celtic chief. He was not prepared to let the matter rest. 2 internal SFA investigations cleared Vary of any wrongdoing, but McCann was not to be placated so easily. Some 3 years after the affair, McCann, now back in Canada, finally got the independent inquiry he was after. The media had lambasted McCann for what they believed was a paranoid-fueled witch hunt, but after just 1 day of the independent inquiry, they would be eating their words. Under cross-examination from Celtic's legal representative, Vary was dismantled. Even when presented with overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the SFA chief stuck to his guns and insisted that everything about the deal was completed as per the established protocol. But with every word uttered, he merely dug himself into a deeper hole, and by the end of the day, his reputation and career was in tatters. The SFA conceded the case put forward by Celtic, and acted with an ironic alacrity by immediately suspending Vary. He would later be sacked for gross misconduct, but this belated vindication is scant consolation compared to the league title the club may have won. Back on the pitch, the Hampden triumph of 1995 would prove to be the pinnacle of Burns' Parkhead reign. Tommy was dismissed as manager in 1997 when his team failed to prevent Rangers equalling Celtic's record of 9 league titles in a row. McCann's decision to sack the manager was far from universally popular, with many supporters believing Burns remained the right man for the job. As season 97-98 dawned, the Celtic support were faced with a nightmare prospect. Rangers were just a season away from bettering one of the boys' proudest records, the famed 9 league championships in a row, achieved during the legendary Jock Stein era. That a relatively mediocre Rangers side had been allowed to equal this record was bad enough, but we were now drinking at the Last Chance Saloon, and the beer tasted off. The omens were not good. The talented of troublesome Three Amigos and Hoydonk, Cadet and Di Canio would all depart following very public fallouts with McCann. The loss of such talent was viewed as a major blow, but sadder still was the news that Celtic legend Paul McStay would be forced to quit the game through injury.
It's Celtic first and Celtic last and Celtic over.
So we big Pierre and we had young Paulo, who came with a big reputation as well. And despite what you think about Paulo Di Canio today, and the link with the accusations of fascism and all the rest of it, Paulo Di Canio was a mighty fine player, Scott.
Paulo Di Canio was a couple of years down the line, because you bear in mind you still had George Cadet and you had Andy Tom, and even Martin Vigos, even though he came from Dundee with a kind of wacky name. But I could slabber about Paulo Di Canio for the rest of this podcast. Let's take away what he's done since. Right, what he's done since, it taints things. But this was a true superstar. Right, this guy was an absolute true football player. This was a Celtic player. Whereas them across the road, they would always go for a big fat centre half who would boot you up and down. Some of the things this guy done with a football, it was beautiful. He was my hero for that whole year he was there. But
I always describe Paulo Di Canio as being worth the admission fee on his own. Because he entertained, at long last, after all the drivel that we had had for the previous 6-7 years, we had a footballer there, and I know we had Paul McStay, we some others that were entertainers as well. But Paulo Di Canio, what was in his boots was just gold.
Mm-hmm.
Pity what was in his gob was just not gold. but
in fairness to him, he talked the talk. Everything about him at Celtic, apart from his last month, apart from when all the bail came out and he forced his move, because I firmly believe, even if Fergus screwed him out a couple of grand, I still believe he forced his move, he forced his way out the club, and nobody will change my opinion on that. But see, for that, I mean, there's an allegation that goes against him. You remember the game when Falkirk beat us in the Scottish Cup. Falkirk beat us after the replay. There was one HM event, and it was bucketing down again. It was at their midden across the road, and he bust his arse that day, Chris. And people say that he was too greedy. See how I remember it? Everybody just kept giving him a ball and just hoping that Paulo would do it because he was that good a player. He was a stunning player. There was a game, it would have been the year that Paulo signed, the first game of the season. I think we drew 2-2 with Aberdeen. And Pierre Van Hooydonk scored an absolute screamer of a free kick that day. And he was interviewed after the game. And obviously we'd never seen Paulo Di Canio at that point. And they were interviewing him and they're going, oh, drop 2 points and all that. And Big Pierre says, well, see when Paulo comes, we'll start winning games. And I've got him at a Saturday like, oh, you're a dancer. What have we got here? What have we got here? And man, the guy was a genius. He was a genius. I don't care what anybody says.
So we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves a wee bit.
We definitely are.
1985, we spent the year away from home. And as you say, it was one of the first seasons that, you know, we all started to get season tickets and all that kind of stuff. The Hampden year was honking, wasn't it?
It was grim, man. It was grim. I'll tell you a reason why it was extra grim for me. My dad couldn't afford a season ticket for me, and obviously I couldn't afford a season ticket. And I joined the Celtic pools to get a season ticket. This is
You're a legion of thousands.
And it was done in my dad's name, because I could only be about 16 or something, but we've done it through my dad's name, and I went round the whole night, and I ended up, and I think you had to get £40 worth to get your season ticket for nothing. And I got my season ticket for nothing. And there was a big square at Hampden of empty seats, and I was sat right in the middle of it. And every week I sat there myself in this wee square. It was grim, man. It was horrendous. And the highlight, or the low light should it be, is Partick Thistle battering us 3-1. That sums up Hampden for me that year.
That whole season was just turgid from start to finish. And I think it was down to the fact, like, mentally we knew a new day had dawned. But, you know, you were like a kid on Christmas Eve. You hadn't got your hands on your toys yet.
Yeah.
You know, and we went through all that. And I remember going over to the Derby match, and we were right beside the Rangers supporters. And they were all waving tenors at us and fivers at us and singing, "You haven't any money," and all that there kind of stuff. And it was just, although it was stressful and depressing at the time, you just thought, you know what, the future's going to be brighter than this. But we were so far behind, Scott.
Aye. But there was glimpses there, weren't there? I again referred back to the last podcast. You kept rightly bringing up that no matter how far they stretched ahead of us, and they were stretching ahead of us with buying all these big players, and we were kind of falling for plonker to plonker in terms of running the club. And but you always felt every summer came around, this is the year we're going to win it, and common sense says no chance.
I know.
But every year we say we're going to win this. But there was wee signs. I mean, Phil O'Donnell was a smashing looking player. Pierre Van Hooydonk looked the real deal. Tommy looked like he knew it was day. And there was grim. I mean, you even think about it. That Hampden year we scored goal of the season. Do you remember that? John Collins. And I think he only got it because Peter Grant done a back heel.
You just summed up that year in one sentence. Peter Grant done a back heel.
It was against Hibs at Hampden. I think we won 3-1 or 3-0, and Peter Grant done a back heel. John Collins passed the ball to Peter Grant back heel it, and he curled it in the corner, and he got goal of the season. So it wasn't all bad.
We seek him here.
But how did you feel when you heard we'd Stoke the town?
Amazing. I never slept all weekend. That weekend I was so relieved more than anything. I didn't think we were going to do it, but it was like a weight off your shoulders once you found out we Stoke the zombies for doing it.
Yes, you can look Dublin town.
Favourite ever Celtic game you ever went to?
2-1 against St Johnstone.
The day we stopped the 10?
Yeah.
The day we stopped the 10?
Yes.
Aye.
Every town, 'cause he's a dedicated follower of Celtic.
Where were you when we stopped the 10?
In the stadium. Block 406, row D, seat 16. And trying to work my way how I was going to get down to the lower tee to go on that pitch. Incredible day, crazy day. Ended up back at a supporters do that night in Blantyre, and I think it lasted for about 72 hours.
Just to finish off, mate, if that's what Celtic means to you in a few words, what would you say?
One word: everything.
Oh yes he is, oh yes he is. Germany or Holland and in Norway.
Right, important question, where were you when we stopped the 10?
Springburn Park.
You know it again?
No, it was a football. I had a season book with my pal, but it was in his dad's name, and his two pals were there for Ireland, so he could stick it to them, so we had to listen to the radio up at Solhouse in Ballomo.
Do you have a refreshment with you?
Load up, mate.
With Buckfast wine, 1967.
Right here with Kev, the day we stopped the 10, what did you do, Kev?
Got right arse drunk. I can't quite mind, to be honest with you. The back party into the Dolphin.
Before the game, were you nervous, or?
Aye. Oh, aye. Larson scored in the first couple of minutes, helped sell the airs, but when Brad Back got the winner, or to seal like that just calmed you down altogether, no? Yeah. Still can't mind much about after the game. Just mind walking down to Gallagher, a couple of things to Gallagher and then went back to Partick. I think that's what right, aye. And we bumped into a few of the Rangers supporters later on that night. Still got the war wounds.
You never hide his colours, 'cause these colours they don't run, 'cause he's a dedicated follower of Celtic.
We beat St Johnstone at the top of 10 in a row. What were you thinking about that day? Come up to the game, were you nervous about it, or? No. Where did you go after it? What's we brought to Ferry?
Past the champagne bucket for a minibus to a car through a sunroof. Got a wee bit drunk. Ended up in a Celtic pub in Dundee. Put Mongo him in a taxi. The drunkest I've ever seen him.
Alright, so we'll move on to the next season, and this was a season again. We're back to Celtic Park, and things on the pitch were starting to look an awful lot better. And we had a good side, nice attacking side, going forward we were lovely. At the back we were honking, so we were. But 95, 96, ended up in second place for the first time in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 seasons since the centenary year.
Jeez, man, that's terrible, isn't
it? Yeah. And
we're also back in Europe, despite finishing fourth.
That's right, back in Europe as well. So things were starting to look up a wee bit that season.
It started, it looked alright. Andy Tom was a massive signing. Again, it followed in the Pierre type of mould. A guy that named Chiterdi, I think it was £2.2 million for Bayer Leverkusen. As you said, I think it was that season we got Jackie McNamara in as well. But you're right when you said I'm pretty certain we signed John Hughes. And John Hughes, God bless John Hughes. John Hughes was a nice guy and stuff like that, but
he was no Roy Aitken, was he?
No, he cost you $200,000 for Falkirk. He gave you his heart and soul, but I don't know. Tommy Burns had his feelings, and defensively certainly was one. I can never understand why he never ever looked at another goalkeeper as well, because we still had that Due Marshall floating about, didn't we? But I mean, if you want to kind of look at the season as a whole, we've done bloody well.
All right, so Tommy Burns as manager. Now, we all love Tommy Burns, of course we do. And I remember when Tommy Burns and the club parted company after the Falkirk defeat. And I think everybody knew it was time for Tommy to go, but it was also tinged with an awful lot of sadness, wasn't it?
Oh, wholeheartedly. That game, we could be 1-0 and you knew, didn't you? Would you have been at that game that day, Chris?
I wasn't, because it was a replay, so it was, Scott. It was on a Tuesday night.
I think it was a Tuesday night or something, and it was bucketing down.
Yeah.
Absolutely bucketing down. And again, it was at the midden, and it was one of the ones you just wanted to go out and hug him and say, right, enough's enough. Do you know what I mean? It's not happening. And but the thing is, he knew as well, didn't he? He kind of knew the script. You know when it's not happening, and I think in fairness to Tommy, he knew it wasn't happening. I think your professional pride comes into it, but you're 100% right. It's like putting down the family dog, was it no?
It was exactly like that. And do you know what was funny about it? For the only time that I remember in being a Celtic supporter, you know, every manager that left at the time, wrongly or rightly, and you know, despite you don't appreciate some of the things they've done, I was glad to see them go. It was time for a change.
Mm-hmm.
And when Tommy went, you're right, it's like putting down the family dog. Nobody would talk about it, and Tommy just left. There was nobody calling for Tommy Burns to go, but everybody knew.
Everybody knew, but as I go back to say, he's one of us. He knew as well. It was a kind of with hindsight to find out that they cheated him for years. Kind of sticks in the throat, does it no? But I had to go. Pardon the bum. Thanks for your effort, Tommy. We're going to get somebody else. And the fact that he ended up by the club just proves what a Celtic man he was, does it no?
You know, some people might even suggest that to be Celtic manager, Tommy Burns maybe was too much of a supporter.
I don't know if that's true, because he gave it a friendly hit. I mean, you think about some of the guys that he signed, right? And the guys might be talking rubbish, but did then them walk away criticising Tommy Burns? Did then them say, "Oh, his training wasn't good enough," but just fell short? And maybe it goes back to his wee blind spot with the defence. I mean, you think about it, he brought in Alan Stubbs. He was kind of the only major defensive player we brought, wasn't he?
And when we signed him, he was captain of Bolton, and Bolton had just been relegated.
It was a smashing signing. But you look at even every defender aside from him, right? He brought Tosh McKinley, an attacking fullback. He brought Jackie McNamara, an attacking fullback who ended up a midfielder. And Rico Anoni, a maniac. He had this Celtic attacking mentality that maybe he needed somebody beside him to kind of give him an alternative.
Well, the reason why I ask you that question, was he too close to the club? Because yes, we probably needed a Celtic man to get everybody back and get everybody back on side with the one direction that the club were going in. But when you look at Wim Jansen coming to replace Tommy Burns, that was probably what was needed at that time. Somebody who was professional. You know, Celtic wasn't in their heart, it wasn't in his blood. He was there to do a job, and he done it. He
could be cold about it.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, everything I've read about Wim Jansen, he was very cold to it. It was. I mean, you can imagine Tommy Burns having a major deal to drop a Paul McStay, to drop a Peter Grant. You could see him struggling with that, and whereas Wim Jansen would walk in the door and go, "Nah, you're not good enough," or you're not doing the job anymore. So he had that coldness. So maybe you're right. I don't know. I think. I don't know, Chris.
(1994 to 1995) seen a continuation of the home shirt used from the previous season. This season would see the Bonnet go to war with the SFA and the provision that all shirts should have numbers on the back. Now, if you know the history, Celtic had never worn numbers on the back of the home shirt in domestic competitions, so wee Fergus tried to get round this by putting numbers in the sleeves of the shirts. This lasted for 3 games before the SFA were having none of it. They threatened Fergus with a fine each time we didn't wear a number on the back, and quite quickly the Bonnet backed down. So on the 27th of August 1994, Celtic wore numbers in the back of their shirts for the first time in domestic competition with a 2-0 win over the Old Rangers. 1995 to 1996 seen a new style of home kit introduced, and for me it reminds me of Tommy Burns' time in charge of Celtic. It featured alternative size green and white hoops, and within the green hoops the following elements were present in dark shading: the Celtic crest, the Umbro logo and Umbro text, and Celtic was also written in a Gaelic font. A white C.R. Smith logo was present within the middle of the shirt. White shorts with 3 green blocks down each side complemented the shirt, which was finished off with alternative sized green and white hoops in the socks with a white trim just below the knee. The home shirt used in the one-in-a-row season in 1997-1998 was a new retro-styled kit with its large collar and small diamond shadow pattern within each green hoop. A V-neck area just below the neck was present, which had Celtic FC written in green text. One large shadowed Celtic crest also featured in the front of the shirt, but again only within the green hoops. C.R. Smith was gone as his shirt sponsor, and Umbro logo and text now took its place within a white area in the front of the shirt. All white shorts were used along with the white socks with a thick green hoop around the shin and a green strip just below the knee. 1988 to 1999 seen the same style of kit used in the one-in-a-row season, but for this season on the top left of the front of the shirt, embroidery commemorating our stopping of 10 in a row was present. Scottish Premier League champions 1997-1998 was in place with white embroidery for this season. 1999 to 2000, a more rigid form of equally sized green and white hoops was introduced, which become synonymous with the John Barnes area and Martin O'Neill's first season in charge. NTL was the shirt sponsor for this season. White shorts with a green trim down each side and plain white socks with green Celtic text just below the knee finished off this season's home kit. This kit would also be synonymous with a major product recall shortly after the start of the season, when fans buying shirts realised that once they washed them the shirts became very wobbly, so Celtic recalled them all and giving everybody brand new shirts.
Well, the interesting fact is Tommy Burns was actually offered another job instead of sacked, or before he was sacked. He was offered a job with youth development at Celtic, and he said no, and he resigned on the 2nd of May. Well, mutually consented, as they call it in the game.
And it started all over again. A search for another manager.
The madness, aye. And that was the same madness we had for 3 seasons in the bounce.
Yeah. And the thing about Wim Jansen coming in, first of all, nobody had heard about him, right? I know he played for Feyenoord and all the rest, but we know about him now. But at the time when Wim Jansen became Celtic manager, let's be honest, did you go Wim who?
100%. 100%. And I came home from college and I'd heard, and it was, and do you know that way, you're kind of half shouting at your mammy, and your mammy's getting the answer for you, but you're going, who is this person? She's going, I don't know. You're going, who is she? Who is he? Madness, Wim Jansen, who is this guy? It was nothing. And again, you can't underestimate how times have changed with regard to the internet. We'd know everything about him within 10 minutes of this guy stepping in the front door. Yet we still didn't, the season started, we still didn't know who he really was. Who is this guy? What did he do?
Hugh Keevins told us Gus Hiddink was already signed, sealed and delivered.
Aye.
He had an exclusive on it. I remember I was actually on my holidays at the time, and I was driving along in the south of Ireland, down around Waterford, and local RTE radio came bouncing through all these terrible, Philomena Begley tracks and stuff, and says, exclusive, the new Celtic manager has been announced, and anybody who would listen in the car, I was going, oh, here we go, Gus Hiddink, we're back, shh. Yeah, all that, shh. Wim Jansen. And there was just silence as everybody looked at me, and I was like, who? And I done the same thing you done to your mommy. I started shouting at the radio, who the hell's Wim Jansen?
And And it led 2 or 3 weeks of kind of looking about, everybody going, so who is this guy? What's happening here?
And then Vim turns up in his bubble coat and his perm, and it was just like, oh my God.
Spamming me up, aye. And it's just, the mad thing that summed up that, right, we had Wim Jansen and Murdo McLeod come back to get the whole Celtic flavour. I think Eric Black would have been floating about at that point, would he? Nice Eric Black there. And if you remember that summer, we couldn't get a sponsor either.
That's
Do you
right.
remember?
Yeah.
We couldn't get, and we ended up with this horrible big Umbro in the middle of the hoops, man. And then, as you say, we had this wee funny guy with a wig. You know what I mean? And it's just not, it's not going wrong. It's supposed to be good. I don't know, man. Wim Jansen, and then, to be honest, then you get into some of his signings. His signings were kind of mental as well, as you remember.
But if he started on the 3rd of July, he mustn't have had any time even to put his list of signings in.
So who signed him? What was saying? I think he signed him.
No, I think he probably rushed getting a lot of these guys in, you know. And again, you know, he done okay. You know, you think he brought in Larson, who nobody had heard of. You know, he signed Craig Burley, Stephen Mahay, Mark Reaper. Lambo came then too, right?
Exactly, but a load of these signings are said to be signed by Jock Brown. Because you forgot that he joined the club as well.
We're going to get on to Jock Brown in a minute.
I went up to Celtic Park, Chris, the day that Darren Jackson signed. I don't know why I chose. I'll tell you why. I was doing a driving lesson, and it was just about finished, and I said to him, you can drop me off at Celtic Park. And I went up there, and Darren Jackson came out, and these 2 guys gave him a taunty abuse. 2 Celtic fans. Away you go, you dumpling, beeping this, and you can see Jackson just kind of going, oh, yeah, thanks for that. And now that might need to stop to me. You're like,
still, Darren Jackson turned out very well, I thought, for Celtic.
Jackson was alright, wasn't he? Somebody, right, I don't know, are we going to touch on Henry Larsson, or will I go into the expletives anew?
Knock yourself out.
God, there you go, that's what they said, God. This guy, Henry Larsson, and I'll tell you, I couldn't burn that cup. I hung about with it at the time. Loved Henry Larsson. Absolutely loved him. And he used to say to me all the time, I think Rangers to sign him, Rangers to sign Henry Larsson. And he was gutted the day. And that was the only reason I was happy about it, because it was upsetting him. I'd never heard of Henry Larsson either.
Nobody had, apart from your pal.
But, you know, loved him.
I know an awful lot's made about Larsson and, you know, giving the ball to Chick Charnley, you know, against Hibs and stuff, you know, and Charnley scoring the goal of his life and stuff. But really, that's the reality of the thing.